story about the Northland woman who is facing charges over claims that she made hundreds of dentures without certification. Claire Wahongi Mateni, who's colloquially known as the Tooth Fairy, she's helping out locals by fixing or making them new dentures. Now, she did have some experience. She wasn't just doing it at home as a hobby. She'd previously worked in the industry. She spent 10 years repairing and making them in labs in Auckland and Hamilton, but she says that there's a real demand, which there obviously is because of dental care and the prices, and many that have used her services say they would have struggled to find work if they hadn't had the help from the Tooth Fairy. So do you think it's a bit rough to throw the book at her?
If I may speak first, I think it is very rough to throw the book at her. And the reason why the Tooth Fairy exists, and good on her too, is for the same reason I talked about that young fellow and the dental work for this young guy who'd gone off the rails and is now going, well, I think was in the vicinity of $10,000 to $12,000. May have been more. I think the dentists themselves reduced the price. So, there's a lot of people who haven't got a show of going to a dentist and getting their teeth fixed. There are middle-class New Zealanders who go to Thailand and stay there and get their teeth fixed and come back again. So if anybody who's got a modicum of school, which clearly this woman has, good on her and carry on.
Do you think they should be looking at ways at getting her the right qualifications?
Well, the barefoot doctor thing in China, that caused an amazing growth in people's health and well-being in China. And these were people who were trained to a certain minimum standard and sent out in the countryside to do what they did. It seems to me this woman is doing the same thing. By all means, get alongside her, but do get alongside her. Don't stop her from doing what she's doing. Help her to get necessary qualifications and train other people as well.
This person's just a text to say, just ordered a new top dental plate, over $4,000.
There we go.
Very expensive. Nalini, what do you think about the Tooth Fairy in Northland?
How much experience do you think she's got if she can successfully make and people are happy with the product?
Well, 10 years. She spent 10 years repairing and making them in labs in Auckland and Hamilton. So she has worked in the industry, knows what she's doing.
So we really need to have some process that recognises experience and awards her a certificate that she can use to trade legally.
Yes, so she, as I said, she knows what she's doing, and this is such a big issue in New Zealand, the issue of going to the dentist, and you just don't go if you don't have the money, and you end up, with your teeth falling out.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, look at the reports coming in from hospitals around the country saying we can't cope, Auckland in particular. They've got waiting lists of thousands of kids who have to have full-on knockout anaesthetic and get their teeth fixed, and there's a waiting list for yonks. So we've got to do something.
And it's something we've talked about for this entire hour. It's part of the poverty cycle, isn't it? You can't afford dental care. So, as you said, Gary, when that chap got dental care, he got a job.
That's right, and he got confidence, self-confidence. He started to believe in himself for the first time in 10 years. So, how I think it's so wonderful. So good work to the Tooth Fairy. Congratulations, keep up the good work. Don't let the system knock you over, because the system will, because someone wants to certify you so they can charge necessary fees. So that's what that's about.
Very good. Lots of feedback for you too. I haven't got time to read it all for you, but Gary, the limo, got the most feedback, I'd say. And it was the opposite to what you were told this morning. Nalini Baruch, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Karen. Lovely to hear you.
And good to talk to you too. And radio presenter and raconteur, Gary McCormick. That's me for today, for the panel, and for Wallace Chapman. Back tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, Tim Shadbolt, the country's longest-serving mayor, is struggling to do his job, according to a new report, with concerns raised about his short-term memory and signs of confusion. Protesters occupying the site of a controversial new development in Wellington say they're in for the long haul. We talk to the capital's mayor. Hello from stateside. President-elect Joe Biden dials up our Prime Minister. A promise Transmission Gully will be open sometime next year. The helicopter pilot grounded by COVID who's keen to try his hand as a wharfie. And talk about using up your 9 lives. The tale of Rodney, the abandoned ITM cat, takes a less than perfect turn.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Prime Minister says the decision whether to remove a child from its whānau rests with the state for good reason. The Children's Commissioner is calling for urgent change to Oranga Tamariki, telling the government to commit to a transfer of power to Māori when it comes to Māori children. Jacinda Ardern says progress has been made on working more closely with Māori on these issues, and more of that needs to happen more quickly.
I think the conversation that needs to be had is, it sits with us for very good reason, because it is such a significant use of power. But the way it has been done has been hugely problematic. And so rightly now we've had 4 reports all looking into this issue, and now it's our job to act on that. But we're not going to do it unilaterally, otherwise we'll end up repeating our mistakes.
Meanwhile, Ms Ardern has offered the United States access to New Zealand's COVID-19 health team for advice on the pandemic. She spoke to President-elect Joe Biden this afternoon for the first time since his victory, offering congratulations and inviting him to visit. She says he spoke positively, in particular about New Zealand's response to COVID-19, and she told him officials would be available to discuss the experience here. Invercargill's Mayor Tim Shadbolt says he's been made the scapegoat for the City Council's failings. An independent governance review has found that he has been increasingly unable to fulfil his duties and that most of the council's problems stem from a leadership void. The review report, released today, says interviewees reported concerns such as Sir Tim's short-term memory deficits, his confusion and embarrassing incidents during meetings. But Sir Tim doesn't accept that.
I believe the battle for the mayoralty didn't end at the last elections. I am being accused of failing to bring the council together, but the simple truth is you can't lead people who refuse to be led.
Sir Tim Shadbolt. School principals are disappointed a national study has found little change in children's literacy. The National Monitoring Study of Student Achievement report says scores in reading and writing last year were mostly similar to previous results. Perry Rush from the Principals Federation says that's not what schools hoped for.
It really is disappointing, particularly as we've worked very hard in schools with a very strong emphasis on the core, on doing better in reading and writing and mathematics. And I think despite that very strong emphasis that's come through from government and in policy, we're just not seeing the gains.
Perry Rush says it's time for schools to try new approaches to teaching reading and writing. A woman in her 60s was left partly paralysed after a surgeon put screws in her spine in the wrong place. A report by the Health and Disability Commissioner says an orthopaedic surgeon did the initial surgery in a private hospital in 2017. A CT scan after a fall the following month revealed the error with the screws. 3 years on, the woman is still living with pain and lower body paralysis despite many corrective procedures. Her daughter says she is now a paraplegic and completely reliant on carers. The Medical Council has been told to consider a review of whether the surgeon is fit to continue his practice. Immigrants whose visas were not processed say they feel scammed because they didn't get refunds. Immigration figures show other visa applicants have been reimbursed more in the past 12 months than in the previous 3 years combined. Shi Lishong from China applied in December 2018, but only got a case officer 2 days after she asked for a refund of her $2,700 fee.
This is completely a robbery, but it's legal, because you don't get to say. They got the final say, sorry, no refund.
Chi Lishong says Immigration New Zealand told her all that had happened to her file since she applied was that it had been moved from one building to another at the same branch. The agency says refunds are not made if substantial work has been done on files. It's just past 5:04. The fight between New Zealand heavyweight boxers Joseph Parker and Junior Farr will now take place in late February or early March. Originally due to be held in Auckland on December the 12th, it was postponed last week after blood tests showed that Farr needed surgery. He won't say what the medical issue is, but expects to be back into full-time training by early January. Farr's manager, Mark Cadell, says both camps want the fight to happen as soon as possible.
Our goal is to get the boys in the ring as quick as humanly possible so that they can both move on with their careers as well. This is the world number 3 and the world number 6 for the WBO, so there's a lot at stake.
Junior Fast manager Mark Cadell. Russian tennis player Daniil Medvedev has claimed the biggest title of his career, storming back from a set down to beat Austria's Dominic Thiem and win the season-ending ATP finals in London. Medvedev lost the first set 4-6, but took the second in a tie-break and the third 6-4 to become only the 4th player in ATP history to beat the world's top 3 players at the same tournament. Liverpool have moved level with Tottenham Hotspur at the top of the English football's Premier League with a 3-0 win over Leicester City. Everton and West Ham also had wins, while Arsenal drew 1-1 with Leeds. And the New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has recorded her 4th top 10 finish of the LPGA Tour season, with a share of 4th place at the Women's Championship in Florida. That's the news.
The National Party examines its election failure.
Daily broadcasts became televangelistic. Democracy for a period of time gave way to a form of temporary tyranny.
The party calls in the big guns.
If we sit around waiting for Jacinda to make mistakes, then we're not going to win the election in 2023.
But was it enough?
The National Party leadership would be hoping to put this AGM behind them because of the problems that Goodfellow has caused.
National politics on RNZ National. Morning report weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine spells and isolated showers tonight. Scattered rain tomorrow. Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel Peninsula fine with high cloud tonight. Rain developing tomorrow. Waitomotu, Manawatu including central high country. Also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly fine tonight. Isolated showers inland. Rain spreading south tomorrow. Some heavy falls are possible. Wairarapa, Horowhenua through to Wellington, cloudy periods with isolated showers developing. Cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain from tomorrow afternoon. For Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, showers becoming isolated this evening, but rain developing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the South Island, mostly fine. Scattered afternoon and evening showers mainly inland, with drizzle developing about the east coast tomorrow night. Chatham Islands, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning, then becoming fine. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. An independent review has found the country's longest-serving mayor, Sir Tim Shadbolt, is struggling to do his job. The review into Invercargill City Council was prompted by the Department of Internal Affairs, which had flagged concern in how the council was operating. The council unanimously accepted the report less than a fortnight ago. Today, with its public release, the mayor was on a completely different page. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has this report from Invercargill.
A leadership void was the clear theme coming out of the independent review. Mayor Sir Tim Shadbolt, it said, is increasingly unable to fulfil his duties. The man himself was quick to rubbish the report.
Anyone who has any faith in this report with its glowing praises and singularly directed criticisms is also likely to believe that we shall soon see Auckland Island pigs flying over Queen's Park.
The council has agreed to bring in 2 external appointees and develop a clear set of delegations for the recently appointed Deputy Mayor, Nobby Clark. The report's author is former Dunedin City Councillor and Southern District Health Board member Richard Thompson. He conceded it wasn't easy to write his report about someone with the mana and standing of Sir Tim. Mr Thompson says interviewees reported a range of obvious concerns, including Sir Tim's short-term memory deficits, his confusion and increasing incidents of embarrassment during meetings, which councillors have done their best to hide from the public. But Sir Tim doesn't accept that.
The report would have you believe that the dysfunction of this current council rests squarely on the shoulders of myself and my new deputy, Nobby Clark. I refuse to believe that the average person on the street is likely to accept that the ongoing strife has been caused by Nobby and myself alone.
Most remarkably, after laying the blame squarely at the feet of others and their political aspirations, and criticising the council organisation for not providing him enough support, Sir Tim finished his almost 10-minute-long statement with this.
This statement forms my complete response to the report. I have nothing further to add.
Sir Tim was flanked by Chief Executive Claire Hadley and Deputy Mayor Nobby Clark as he read his statement. A group of 8 other councillors sat behind him and their disbelief was obvious as some shook their heads. After the briefing to media, some of those councillors expressed their surprise and disappointment. Former Deputy Mayor Darren Ludlow says Sir Tim's position seems to have changed since the meeting on November the 12th.
The Mayor can say what he wants. He's the Mayor. He has a separate mandate from the rest of us. It is a little surprising that his position has changed a little.
Mr Ludlow says he's disappointed in the Mayor's view, but councillors are united in supporting the changes recommended by the report.
That's his prerogative as well. The rest of us, remain really positive and optimistic. We think working with a couple of people who are actively engaged will be useful.
Councillor Leslie Soper emphasised the unity of the councillors.
We've all expressed surprise at what the Mayor said in his statement, and it would be remiss of us to make a comment without taking quite a bit of deep thought on that, but we are all committed to a way forward.
Checkpoint asked Sir Tim directly what responsibility he takes for the current state of the council.
Do you take any responsibility for the situation that the council finds itself in today?
Yes, I do, of course, and I said that in the report, but I'm not prepared to just accept such a huge proportion of the blame.
He describes the report as crucifying him. Sir Tim did have support in the form of his deputy, Nobby Clark, who promised to focus on external stakeholder roles. The outside appointments will be made by the council and its progress will be tracked going forward. The appointees will not have voting rights, but will seek to be, quote, active observers at the council table. From Invercargill for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Iwi members and a protest group are promising they'll be in for the long haul for an occupation of Wellington's contentious seaside development at Shelly Bay. Yesterday, the Mo Whenua group pitched their tents and set up camp in opposition to a developer's plans to build 350 luxury Seaview apartments. Our reporter Eva Corlett and camera operator Samuel Rillstone visited the site.
Shelly Bay has become synonymous with legal battles, famous filmmakers, fraught local politics and iwi infighting. But to Anaru Mefim, who is mana whenua, this headland is much more than a headline.
1,000 years of habitation, of whānau, going about their day-to-day living, engaging. There were dramas, there were battles, there were occupations. This place has a really deep history for all of us. And even now we see for non-Māori, this place is a significant place.
Mr Mefim is part of the Mo Whenua group, Taranaki Whānui iwi members and protesters who believe their iwi sold a large chunk of the land illegally to the developer Ian Castles. Then last week, Wellington City councillors voted in favour of the sale and lease of its land for the development. A builder from Parapara Umu, Mr Mefim, is a little daunted to find himself now leading an occupation.
The easy thing in doing this is that I know in my heart that this is right. I know why I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for. And so that means that personally I can weather whatever comes my way.
Mr Mefim has been involved in the fight to keep the land for 5 years, but declared an occupation yesterday. 8 people stayed in tents and caravans overnight. The Mayor of Wellington, Andy Foster, who is against the development, even stopped in and helped fix a broken tent. Mr Mefim says having mana whenua occupy the land is important regardless of numbers. He says without whenua, there is no mana.
We are standing on it. And we are standing on it for our old people, and we're standing on it for our unborn. And so whether there's one person declaring this sale illegal and wanting the land back, or whether there's 1,000, it makes no difference. We're standing on this land for the people that can't be here.
Mr Mefim says the group is standing against the loss of Māori land.
The transaction was illegal. Claiming ownership of it's illegal. This is stolen Māori land and we want it back.
He says the group will occupy the land until at least March, when a High Court hearing over the land sale will go ahead.
The councillors who voted to sell this land, this is their fault. that we're here. Ian Castles, who then threatened to move on it, knowing there's a court action in place, this is his fault. We are here because it's decisions that others have made, and we will now stay.
A supporter who is also Taranaki whānui, Linda Aroha Olsen, says that she is totally against what she calls a land grab.
This is not just about Taranaki, this is about whānui, ngā haue whā in all cultures and creeds. Come and tautoko us, come and support us for this important kaupapa. The land's been grabbed, it's still carrying on in this generation, it's unbelievable. So we're here not only not for us, we're here for the next generation.
Another supporter who isn't mana whenua, Peter Niven, says he is here because he cares about this land.
We do not need this type of high-value accommodation where a small amount of people will be able to live in high luxury apartments. I'm not saying that this area should be turned into emergency accommodation, but it should be used for supporting life, the type of life that we need in this area, and not what Ian Castles has planned. So I'm just here to help and support the other voices that are more important in this conversation.
The developer, Ian Castles, declined to comment, instead directing us to speak to the Port Nicholson Block Settlement Trust, which manages the treaty settlement package for Taranaki whānui. They haven't responded in time for this story. Councillors who voted in favour of the development have told RNZ the sale would allow iwi to make the most of their treaty settlement investments. I pōneke mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Eva Corlett tēnei.
And joining me now is Wellington Mayor Andy Foster. Good evening. I understand you were down on the site the other day. What was your job down there?
Yeah, look, I knew there was a community gathering there in the afternoon, and I popped along there after I'd been to another event, so it was right at the tail end of it, just to see who was there, what's going on.
And you gave them a helping hand putting up their tents?
Yeah, look, got there and they had a tent up, and anybody who's been tramping a camping goes, hang on, all right, that's not quite right. So there was a tent pole broken, and we managed to extract it and fix it.
So what other help can you give them? Are you going to help them with toilets? Have they got facilities down there?
Look, no, I haven't been asked for anything, and I wouldn't be proposing to get involved in that.
Okay, but you do support them. Why do you support them?
Well, this thing has had a very long gestation, and it's a pretty sad gestation in terms of the decisions that have been made. So, first of all, by councils to exclude the public from having an effective say in the future of the land. We threw the district plan under the bus. This is going back 5 years. So the resource consent became a very limited process. So there are obviously concerns that people have around issues around like road safety, and then of course there were issues within the Taranaki iwi about the sale when there were resolutions passed by the AGM of the Port Nicholson Block Settlement Trust to say don't sell, and they went ahead and sold.
So you're concerned.
There's a lot of concerns.
You're concerned about process, and just on the subject of process, don't you normally need a permit to protest on council land, and do these protesters have a permit to be there?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Haven't you checked it out?
No.
Even though you're down there helping them put up their tent?
Fixing a tent pole.
Okay, so the council voted for, effectively, to allow the development to go ahead. That's democracy, isn't it? So why aren't you supporting the decision of the council that you are part of?
Yeah, look, there was three things, at least three hurdles the process that the development had to get through. First one of them was our agreement to sell and lease, so we've done that. The second one's the judicial review, which Enterprise Miramar have brought in front of the High Court, which was heard last week, and I guess we'll hear what the outcome of that is, I would imagine early next year. And then there's the Malwhenua case, which is about against the sale of their own land, which will be heard in March next year. So there's three things to go through.
But the reality is that until the courts rule on those matters, the status quo is that Ian Castles has a right to develop that land. I'm just wondering, can you remind me how much did Peter Jackson throw into your mayoral campaign?
I don't think it's particularly relevant.
It is, isn't it? Because he objects to this development, and I'm just wondering, what was the figure again?
Yeah, look, he supported me, I'd say he and Fran supported me on the basis that I've been consistent about Shelly Bay for several years before that.
What's the number? Just clarify the number again for me, please.
They shared that concern. It's in all the records.
Okay, so you must know it off the top of your head. What's the problem with just telling me again?
So you know it as well.
What's the number?
30,000.
Okay, so is that donation to your campaign part of supporting his position now?
No.
Really?
No.
Doesn't sway your actions at all?
Not for a second. They supported me because of my pre-existing position.
So this is an issue, really. I suppose it's about property rights, isn't it? So if a councillor helped a protester set up a tent and move on to your property in Karori to protest over something, would you be fine with that?
I wouldn't be particularly thrilled by it at all.
Then why are you helping these protesters move on to the site to protest over property rights?
As I said, I didn't. All that was there is, hey, tent's broken, can you fix the pole? Yeah, fix the pole. Easy.
Right, so you were helping them and you were down there supporting them?
And I just took the initiative to say that looks broken and I fix it.
How do you think this is going to work in the future if it's necessary to trespass these people or to evict them from the site there? How will that work and what will your involvement be?
That will go through whatever the process is if that happens.
And what do you mean, whatever the process is?
Well, I mean, there are processes to go through for that, and I'm not particularly familiar with those.
So would you have any say in that kind of decision? And are you able to make that? Are you able to make that kind of decision without taking sides?
Look, I don't know whether we would have any role as elected members in that at all, if that comes to pass.
Right, so you haven't checked that out?
At the moment, no. At the moment, the process we're going through is that officers have been delegated to go through the sale and lease process, and that's what they'll be doing.
Do you not think that it is appropriate for the courts to decide the matter? You've raised the issue that this is before the courts. So have you, jumped the gun in supporting this action before the courts have even come to a conclusion?
Yeah, no, look, I think, and I would have preferred to do things around the other way, which is that before we did our sale and lease, we had some certainty around both the resource consent and the Malwhenua case. That's not the way it's panned out. But we have got what we call some off-ramps in there, so that if either of those cases are successful, then the council has the right to be able to take the land back, if it's been transacted by that stage, which I understand is going to take a little while to do.
But you'll accept the decision of the court either way?
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's the Wellington Mayor, Andy Foster there. It is almost 23 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Let us know what you think about the development at Shelly Bay. The Mayor, he said he helped someone put up their tent yesterday, Sunday, and they are occupying the site in the meantime. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Also, the other council there is Invercargill with a report into the mayoralty of Tim Shadbolt, saying he is struggling to do his job. Love to hear from you on that as well. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has congratulated President-elect Joe Biden on his victory, invited him to New Zealand and offered him the country's health officials to talk to about COVID-19. The Prime Minister says Mr Biden unsurprisingly described the pandemic response as his number one priority.
He spoke very favourably about what he had seen happening in New Zealand and a desire to exchange further information and discuss what we had learnt. So that was an offer that I said we would be happy to help with. I imagine that there will be ongoing dialogue that may take place at an officials level, but that's an offer we were very keen to respond to.
Our political editor, Jane Patterson, joins me now from our Parliament studio. Jane, that all sounded very convivial, but was it just a courtesy call or was it deep relationship bonding over the phone?
Look, it is part of the diplomatic dance. World leaders on their election tend to do the rounds and ring round, friends and allies normally in the first blush. And I think what you can take as a positive sign from this particular phone call is the timing of it. So Joe Biden, really, this included New Zealand in the first group of calls, including countries or after countries like the UK, France, Germany and Canada. And relatively soon in the transition period. And if you compare that to 2016, when it took Donald Trump several months to call Bill English, it took until February after the November election. So I think you can take that as a positive signal in terms of the importance that Joe Biden is putting on the relationship. But look, you would expect this to be a pretty warm and friendly conversation. Jacinda Ardern and Joe Biden, as politicians, have plenty in common, and they traversed a few of those things, including climate change and multilateralism more broadly. But obviously that focus still very much on COVID, particularly for Joe Biden.
Yeah, so COVID was obviously a dominant topic there, and Jacinda Ardern saying that they've offered to share information. Any suggestion that Joe Biden will take us up on the offer?
Yes, she said that it was very warmly received, the offer, and they sounded like they talked about COVID a lot. Now, obviously, Joe Biden is preparing at some point to transition into the White House, and he is trying to gather as much information and expertise around him as possible. So I'm sure that any offers from the likes of New Zealand will be welcome. And as you heard the Prime Minister say there, it would probably be at the officials level, and that's just sharing some of the response, but also that's with the acknowledgement that New Zealand does have natural advantages, including its border, that of course wouldn't be relevant to the United States.
So Biden versus Trump, I mean, is it going to make much of a difference to our relationship with the USA, with Joe Biden as president?
Another important aspect again of this conversation, he used the word reinvigorate. Ms Ardern said he wanted to reinvigorate the relationship with New Zealand. Now, you can take from that basically that the relationship had cooled under Donald Trump, and I think you can see that from the nature of exchanges in terms of that leader to leader with Jacinda Ardern and Donald Trump, which were few and far between. They met a few times at bigger international events and spoke on the phone, and by all accounts, while those personal relationships at the top are very, very important, the work of government just gets on. The diplomats continue diplomatic to diplomatic and government to government. But certainly having a good personal relationship at the top really, really helps, especially when New Zealand has talked about, for example, wanting a direct trade deal with the US. It pulled out of the the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership under Donald Trump. So signs from Joe Biden that he will be going back to things like that, including the Paris Agreement. Now, in terms of visits to the White House, Jacinda Ardern says they will be up. Any decisions will be up to the White House. Of course, Joe Biden is not there yet, so that'll be some way down the track. She said she did extend an invitation for Joe Biden to visit New Zealand, and she said that could, well, she didn't say it could happen, but there's an invitation from Australia next year to celebrate the Anzac anniversary. He's been invited to that, so she said it would make sense for him to carry on and come to New Zealand at the same time.
Any suggestion he'd have to go into managed isolation, Jane?
I would think that a visit to New Zealand might be curtailed, Lisa, if there was any talk of quarantining at the jet park or Sudima on the way in. I don't really think that would be fitting of a presidential visit. She made the point too that while borders are closed, it probably makes these visits a bit more difficult. She did say that he had said that he was very keen that they both meet face to face, but obviously, COVID-19 to manage and get around in the meantime.
Exactly. Thanks, Jane. That's Jane Patterson joining us live from our studio at Parliament there. Now, you know him as Rodney, the abandoned ITM cat. Well, he's rapidly ripping through his 9 lives because he is MIA again. So just to get you up to speed with the tabby tales, earlier this year things got a bit feral after it was revealed a worker at the building supply store in Martin had dumped Rodney in the countryside because he'd allegedly become a little bit of a nuisance after 10 years as the store moggy. Customers kicked up, a search party was launched, weeks passed, and then the perfect ending. Rodney was found wandering on a local farm. Last we heard, Rodney was off to his forever home in the town he grew up in. But as Beverly Dowling from Rodney Rescue explains, that didn't work out.
Apparently, Rodney kept returning to his beloved ITM, and they did all the right things. They contacted the owner, and the owner came, picked him up, and I understand, but it's unconfirmed, that he was then rehomed to another home, and he left there as well and returned to the ITM. And again, the ITM looked after him, fed him, kept him warm, tried to figure out what to do with him, and Our understanding is that the person decided to contact the SPCA and relinquish him to the SPCA with the caveats to change his name and move him out of Whanganui in the hope that being further away from ITM, he would stay where he was.
So they changed Rodney's name so he can start a new life, right?
Yeah, he went to the New Plymouth SPCA and a young couple came along and he absolutely loved this young fellow. And they decided to take him on. He looked like a very sad old cat. And as they got to their front door, and they thought that the carrier was all secure. However, as they got to the front door and a dog barked, Rodney flew out of the cage and flew off. He ran away very fast. Now, I did find out that the young man that Rodney really liked is a labourer. I asked them, I said, is he a labourer by any chance? And they said, yes. And I said, oh, he would have smelt like heaven to Rodney because he'd been surrounded by tradies and hardware and the smell of wood. So, they are a lovely, lovely young couple and they are right behind the search for Rodney. Now, he went missing 5 weeks ago. And I only just found out on the 20th of November about all this, and slowly information is sort of floating to the surface. We just had no idea, neither did Martin Moggies.
Gosh, Beverly, I've got these visions of Rodney sort of, with his swag on his back, heading back to Martin,
It was bad enough last time when we were figuring out as the crow flies and what streets and barriers he'd potentially follow, but now we're looking from New Plymouth. But you know what? I feel like he is probably still sort of within the area that he's going. Now, today we've just couriered off about 1,000 flyers, and I've got Team Taranaki, Rodney Rescue Part 2, ready to roll. And I'm probably going to drive up from Levin and go to New Plymouth and just start to head it off and touch base with the young couple so they can put a face to the name, and we'll get things underway.
You're determined to find him, because I'm just wondering, just let me put this to you, excuse me. You are dogged. But are we sure that Rodney wants to be found?
I think he does. He was miserable. Imagine he went from the place that he loved, but it was not an option for him to stay there. He went from the place that he'd grown up in. He's gone from one house to another house, to the SPCA, to another SPCA. He's, in the little SPCA compartments there. And he's just scared and frustrated and old. I think he'd much rather, he would just like to be back at ITM, to be honest. But there is a plan in place. And like I said, there was always a plan in place. It's just a shame the people who were meant to do that didn't follow up, and the communications weren't put through. I think they were wanting to protect him from the media. He was high profile, and he still is. But the thing is, he was a great ambassador for all cats that are lost, abandoned and dumped. And we have a huge problem in New Zealand with that. And of course, the cat hating brigade has also fed into the mythology of these cats. But so many of them are just domesticated cats that have fallen on hard ways.
Beverly, we don't want everybody going around plucking up random tabbies thinking that they've found Rodney. So what's the advice?
The advice is, if you see a tabby cat, particularly around the Spotswood area of Taranaki, of New Plymouth, please do not approach. If you are close enough that you can get a photo, that is fantastic. And either contact me through the Rodney's Rescue page or on my home phone. Yeah.
And just a quick question before we go, Beverly. Should we call him Rodney? I mean, if we see him and we go, here, puss, 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 are we saying, come on, Rodney? Or does he answer to...
The big thing is to not call out his name. If you call out a name as if you're trying to get the attention of a cat, they're just going to run away in the opposite direction. So I'd be like, hello, boss, how are you? And also he responds more positively to men. He likes men. So I would approach very, very quietly. I certainly wouldn't be grabbing him. I would just be giving us a call and letting us know, taking a photo, going to the Rodney's Rescue. If people are sort of going out there trapping random tabby cats, and seriously, New Zealand is full of them, it's just going to turn crazy, and we don't want him going to ground. But if I saw a tabby cat with a white flame on its face and a white bib that looked like Rodney, I would be saying, "Hello, puss, how are you? What you doing?" If you can do those little chirrups, it is like a hello, it's saying you're friendly. But the important thing is to not look at them directly. Sort of, squinty eyes and soft, slow blinks is telling them that you're not a threat. And to sit quietly, not to go for them, not to walk towards them. Be quiet, hold your ground, just talk quietly, squinty eyes, slow blink.
Right, so if you have spotted Rodney, let us know. We're keen to hear from you. He is microchipped and there's a $250 reward for finding him. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the Health Minister's concerned hundreds of St John paramedics will walk off the job on Wednesday. An out-of-work helicopter pilot reckons he'd make a great wharfie at the slammed ports of Auckland. And come hell or high water, Transmission Gully will be open for motorists next year. That's NZTA's promise. Now, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susanna.
The Prime Minister says the decision whether to remove a child from its whānau sits with the state for good reason. The Children's Commissioner is urging the government to transfer power from Oranga Tamariki to Māori when it comes to Māori children. Jacinda Ardern says the way removing children has taken place is what has been problematic and more progress needs to be made on working with Māori. Invercargill's Mayor Tim Shadbolt says he's been wrongly blamed for the City Council's dysfunction. An independent governance review has found most of the council's problems stem from a leadership void because the Mayor has been increasingly unable to fulfil his duties. But Sir Tim says he's being scapegoated for the council's failings and is calling the review flawed. Iwi members and a protest group are readying themselves for a lengthy occupation of land at Wellington's contentious seaside development Shelly Bay. The Wellington Iwi Taranaki whānui has sold a large part of the land to the developers, but some Iwi members believe the sale was illegal. The Mo Whenua group pitched their tents yesterday, and spokesperson Anoru Mefim says he will peacefully occupy until next year's High Court hearing on the land sale. The Medical Council will consider whether a surgeon is fit to continue practising after a woman was left partly paralysed from spine surgery. The surgeon put screws in her spine in the wrong place, and a CT scan after a fall the following month revealed the error. 3 years on, the woman is still living with pain, and her daughter says she is now a paraplegic and completely reliant on carers. The US President-elect Joe Biden has expressed a desire to reinvigorate his country's relationship with New Zealand. Mr Biden spoke to Jacinda Ardern this afternoon for the first time since his victory. Ms Ardern says the conversation was positive and warm, covering areas where the two countries could work together, such as trade and climate change. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's get to the business news now with Nicholas Poynton, who is in our Wellington studio today. Nicholas, so shoppers, you say, have been spending up large over the past 3 months. What are they spending their money on?
Yeah, we got some backwards-looking data from Stats NZ today. This is the consumer spending data for the 3 months to September. And we always knew there was going to be a huge rebound in spending over this quarter, but the question was, how big would that bounce be? And the data shows that retail sales volumes, they rose by a third over the period. That's an 8% increase on the same quarter a year ago. And it's also, it stands in stark contrast to the 14% drop we saw in consumer sales volumes over the June quarter. And what you're really seeing there is the effect of loosening restrictions as we came out of lockdown, and also that pent-up demand. Put that together and we've seen this huge boost in consumer spending. But the data also gives us a bit of a heads up on what New Zealanders were spending their money on. And I wonder, Lisa, if you were among those New Zealanders out there who had a huge appetite for cars, appliances, electronics, DIY products, or groceries.
Groceries.
Yeah, I know it's a bit boring really, but I guess we are sort of eating out less and buy more for home. But look, however, there were significant falls in sales of fuel, hospitality and accommodation, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. But the all-important question is will this spending continue into the future? And the senior economist for the Westpac Bank, Satish Ranchod, says he's optimistic that spending will hold up into next year. He points to a strong housing market and better than expected unemployment results as a reason why people might feel empowered to continue to spend more.
Okay, the other thing you've been looking at is these audits of businesses that claimed wage subsidies recently. And this is a story that our listeners are really interested in. So what have you found out?
Yeah, a while back, look, I've just been wanting to find out how many audits MSD has actually done of those people who've received money from the wage subsidy scheme. And we know that MSD, they have a team of about 100 fraud staff looking at this, and they've done about 10,500 audits of the 759,000 applicants who received money from that $14 billion scheme. So documents released to RNZ under the Official Information Act show that of these audits, just under 1,000 have been required to make a partial or full repayment of the money that they received. So far, about 577 businesses have made repayments. That's about $19 million worth, and that's compared with the $510 million that's been paid back on a voluntary basis, that is, from about 17,000 businesses. And the ministry says that in the vast majority of cases, employers, they have followed the scheme's criteria. Separate to those audits, though, MSD has also been working through complaints about abuse of the scheme, and they've also conducted about 300 investigations, which has seen them identify about several hundred businesses that also need to make a payment, partial or full. So according to the ministry, where money was wrongly claimed, they say it was very rarely out of a desire to deceive or defraud the scheme. Rather, for the most part, it was just businesses that didn't properly understand the rules properly. And so, all in all, you could probably say that most businesses have adhered to the spirit of the scheme. Remember, it did operate on this high trust model. But look, this is just 10,500 audits of a scheme where 759,000 applicants. So it'll be interesting to know how many more audits MSD actually plans to do, and that's something I plan to look at later this week, and hopefully I'll have an answer for you.
Okay, what else has been going on the markets today?
Well, the NZX is up 0.5%, or about 60 points, to 12,501. Our dollar is at 69.5 US cents, 95 Australian, 52.2 British pence. And because I mentioned Bitcoin on Friday, Bitcoin is actually down by 0.75%. A single Bitcoin will net you 26,500 New Zealand dollars.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business news. Work wanted. A fit 62-year-old helicopter pilot out of work due to COVID-19 says it's a tough job market out there, but he's keen to turn his hand to working on Auckland's ports after hearing on Checkpoint that it's desperately short of about 50 employees. Ports of Auckland is facing a barrage of criticism over long delays in docking and unloading ships as retailers wait desperately for stock heading into the Christmas rush. Communications manager Matt Ball told us the port's working with immigration to get visa changes for qualified overseas workers already in the country, and is also hurriedly trying to recruit locals.
We're short of some crane drivers, some straddle operators, and a lot of lashers, and a few other roles. We probably need around 50 people. Long term, we're like many industries like truck driving and others where we have always had a short supply of staff. So we've always been about 30 short in the last sort of 2 to 3, 4 years, but it's got worse as a result of COVID. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to hire people as fast as we can. That, admittedly, is still difficult. We thought maybe things will be better at the moment because a lot of people have lost jobs, but we've got 7 people starting work on Monday, but that's out of over 30 people that we interviewed. Only 7 have got through the process. We are finding it difficult to hire people.
Pilot Peter Matheson heard the interview and thought he's got the skills needed to be a straddle carrier operator. Now, those are those giant machines that are used to move shipping containers around. So he fired off an application.
I was listening to your interview with the port's communication manager going on about how they lacked the straddle carriers for moving containers around the port. And I thought, well, that's something I could do. And he had mentioned that they were taking people on and training them and all those sorts of things. Found their advertisement on Trade Me, put an application in, and sat back and waited for them to respond to that. What I noticed this morning on Trade Me was that they had taken down their advertisement looking for straddle carriers or stevedores as they had it listed.
Have you heard back from them at all?
No, nothing. Not a dicky bird.
So how long's it been since you fired off the application?
Well, that was only about a week or 10 days ago. I'm not sure what day you interviewed him, but it was basically directly after that. I had a bit of a search on Trade Me, found Ports of Auckland. They had a couple of jobs up on there. Found the stevedoring one, which I assumed was what they were looking for. And inside that advertisement, they were looking for straddle carrier operators. So I thought, well, that's something I could do.
Peter, what makes you think you'd be a good straddle carrier operator? What's your experience? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, in recent times, I've been a contract helicopter pilot, but prior to that, I've worked in civil construction. So I've driven diggers and bulldozers and big trucks and cranes and all manner of things. So if it's only a piece of equipment that needs driving, then I'm a very capable driver. So I thought, well, I'm 62 now, and having a stable job, for want of a better word, until I retire would be a good thing. And as I said, the interview that you conducted, he did say that they were looking to train people. So I thought, well, that's something that I could apply myself to. I'm sure I would be good at it and get on and get containers moving, because obviously they have an issue there of getting containers off the wharf.
So obviously as a helicopter pilot, that's pretty complicated machinery. You need to be pretty dexterous. Do you see some parallels with the job that you've thrown your hat in the ring for?
Absolutely. It's all about someone training you for a role and then you conducting that role to the level of training that you've received. So obviously they, within their operation, they have people who can train you to drive a straddle carrier. So it's only taking that information on board and then showing that you've understood it and demonstrating that back to the training people. It's no different to learning to drive a car, I guess. You have to learn to drive it, and then you demonstrate your skill to a testing officer. So it's the same sort of thing.
The port has mentioned that they were talking with the government about getting visa extensions for people who are offshore workers. You're someone local who thinks that you would be good for the job. Do you have concerns about people coming in on exemptions and visas?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it seems to me that we have a large number of people who have skills, maybe not industry specific, but they're not stupid people. They're capable of working. I've been doing some contract digger driving of late, and you start work at 7 in the morning, you finish work at 7 at night. So even at 62, I'm still able to go and do a day's work. All I need is the ability or the opportunity to go and do something a little bit more technical. But I can't see the point of bringing people from overseas when we've got a large number who are already here. I live in Auckland. I live not that far from the port. And so therefore, to me, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you train a local staff to do the local work?
So here's your opportunity. You've got the floor. What's your pitch to the ports? What would you like to say to them, and what would you like from them?
Well, I'd just like them to really follow through with what they said in the interview. This communications manager said that they were prepared to train local people to do that work. And it seems that when you put the application in, they're not interested in local people.
And you'd love to work for them?
Oh, I'd love to work for them. Absolutely. Great place to work. Where does it get better than down on the wharf with all the activity that's going on out in the harbour? I mean, it's a beautiful harbour. It's a great place to work. It's in the city. It couldn't get better, really. And it's time that all employers need to look around and say, hey, you may not have exactly what we want, but you know how to work. You've obviously got some technical skills that we can train you, and let's get on with creating a business and an economy that's inclusive of all people.
Because, sometimes, Peter, people say that, well, some Kiwis don't really want to work and some of us are lazy and we don't want the jobs that are on offer.
Oh, I find that completely wrong. What they seem to really be saying is that we want cheap workers. It's a little bit like Sanford's bringing in the Russian guys. There's plenty of young kids who have been through the Westport fishing college down there who can't get a job on these boats. They've spent all that time and effort and money and they can't get work. So I don't think employers are really being honest with what they're saying.
And we wanted to know what had happened to Peter's application. The Ports of Auckland CEO wasn't available to talk to us, but the Ports have confirmed they got Peter's application and say they prefer to respond directly with candidates rather than via an automated email response, so they can take a little longer to get back to people. And the recruiters were due to contact Peter today. It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Immigrants say they feel scammed after their visas were not processed and they didn't receive refunds. Some are waiting up to 2 years to find out if their application has been successful and don't get their money back if they pull out of the process. Meanwhile, immigration figures show other visa applicants have been reimbursed more in the last 12 months than in the previous 3 years combined. Jill Bonnet reports.
When Chilean Michael Emerde applied for residence in 2019, it cost him $2,700, plus a $500 expression of interest fee. He lost his job as a manager at Auckland's ASB Waterfront Theatre in August, before the visa was processed. He was then turned down for a refund of his visa fee.
I had not even been given a case officer. Nothing had happened to my file. When you apply for something and you don't get a service, you're expecting a refund of the work that wasn't, ever done on your file. They take the money, they just put it in the queue, nothing happens, they'll just get the money and never got the service I paid for.
He's back home now, but he's still angry.
To be super honest with you, I find what INSET does is a government-managed scam.
Chi Li Shuang from China, who worked in the tourism industry in the South Island for 4 years, asked Immigration New Zealand where things were at with her residence application, which she lodged in December 2018.
They said, your document has been transferred from one building to another building of the same branch. Your money is just in there now. You're unable to take it back. I just said, this is completely a robbery, but it's legal. Because you don't get to say. They got the final say, sorry, no refund.
Ms. Chi also found the timing curious.
I've been waiting 1.5 years, and all of a sudden I got a case officer after I submitted my refund request.
She says a partial refund for people who no longer fit the criteria after such a long delay, and the chaos that COVID has caused to jobs, would help them get on with their lives. She would use the money to help as she retrains in early childhood education. Immigration advisor Matt Simpson says the refund refusals are a consumer affairs issue. Government information he received showed little was done on applications before they were sent to a queue for up to 2 years.
It's been triaged at the dock branch and they've confirmed all the information's there. Then it's been filed off to that branch, waited to be allocated. And, there's been talk over the last 12 months about what's happened with all these allocations and if it's immigration's fault or the government's fault. But the reality is they've just been sitting there doing nothing.
Immigrants are also paying to renew work visas in the meantime, which he describes as a money grab. Included in the skilled migrant residence fee of up to $3,300 is a levy of about $800, and he says at the very least that should be refunded. Immigration New Zealand says it works on a cost recovery basis, and refunds are only given in special circumstances. It said it couldn't answer RNZ's Official Information Act request for the number of people who had asked for refunds, as that would involve manually examining each client's file. But almost 3,000 people had received refunds in the 12 months to September, totalling nearly $1.4 million. That's more than the total for the preceding 3 years. For Checkpoint, Jill Bonnet.
Let's head to the US now, and America's national vaccine program says people in the country could start receiving jabs as early as December the 11th. All that's needed is regulatory approval. From there, pharmaceutical companies can send their vaccines to immunisation sites within 24 hours. The good news comes as coronavirus cases across America continue to surge. Some states are ramping up restrictions, including California, which has imposed a nighttime curfew, as David Willis reports.
California, America's most populous state, is reeling from a resurgence of the coronavirus, and its health workers are struggling to cope. The number of new infections here has more than doubled in the last 2 weeks, prompting an overnight curfew.
This is not really surprising. I think this was sort of expected. I think there's this kind of a restriction fatigue or lockdown fatigue, a pandemic fatigue that's taking place. And so many of the people are just not adhering to what the public health people are really recommending.
A total of around 37 million people are subject to California's new stay-at-home order, which prohibits non-essential activity outside the home during the hours of darkness. Lawmakers hope the move will curb the sudden surge in positive test results. Last week's White House coronavirus press briefing was the first in months, and the head of the task force, Vice President Mike Pence, left without taking questions.
Mr. Biden,
President-elect Biden says tackling the coronavirus will be his number one priority. But the longer the transition process is delayed, the longer it will take him and his team to obtain the briefings they need.
Until the General Services Administration ascertains the results of the election, which would allow the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration to proceed, until that happens, our hands are really tied. We're handcuffed.
And that report from David Willis in California. Come hell or high water, Transmission Gully will be open for motorists next year. That's the promise from the New Zealand Transport Agency during a behind-the-scenes tour of the 27-kilometre highway, which has been beset by delays. Our reporter Rachel Thomas and camera operator Dom Thomas went to check it out.
It's one of the country's most ambitious highway projects yet and has been plagued by delays. Constructing Transmission Gully has meant 25 bridges or culverts had to be built to carry motorists from the Kapiti coast into Wellington. The largest is Te Ara or Toa, or Bridge 20, which stretches more than 200 metres over Cannons Creek. We're standing out here on Bridge 20 in Transmission Gully. We've been invited on a tour to see how they're getting on and if they're going to make that September 2021 deadline. The Wellington Gateway Partnership is responsible for the financing, design and construction of Transmission Gully and its operation and maintenance for the next 25 years. Its chief executive, Sergio Mejia, says if it wasn't for COVID-19, motorists would be driving on the road by now. He says the project is on track to be open by next September and there are very few things that would stand in its way.
Inclement weather, a seismic event, that's pretty much what mainly affects rolling projects like this. I'm certain we're going to hit the target. We are fully committed and we're on schedule.
He cites the pandemic as the major reason the April 2020 date wasn't met. Heading up the Wainui Saddle, the sheer scale of the project becomes clear. Hillsides have been gouged out and a stream moved 30 metres to allow this billion-dollar highway to take shape. These giant earth walls are up to 95 metres deep. This terrain is also earthquake-prone and mostly farmland, meaning culverts have had to be dug under roads to allow farmers access to their land. NZTA Senior Manager Andy Thackeray says the project is one of the country's most complex yet.
Definitely been the most challenging. As you can see, it's most challenging, most complex, most expensive. We have had the Kaikoura earthquakes to contend with. We've had the adverse weather conditions and we've also had a global pandemic.
The delays have also seen the cost blow out by $400 million more than originally estimated, with a final cost of $1.25 billion. Andy Thackeray says more delays would have an effect on that final figure.
Assuming that we carry on as we are, and we're confident that we will, to the September opening date, then we should be fine.
With the project now 85% complete, Sergio Mejia says it's nice to think the end is in sight.
It just grasp to the end. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Can't wait for September 2021.
Some construction will continue this Christmas, but motorists shouldn't face extra disruption aside from the usual snail's crawl out of the capital. But come Christmas 2021, the Transport Agency promises drivers a smooth ride on the highway through the hills. For Checkpoint, Rachel Thomas.
And you can check out the video for that story from Rachel and Dom. We'll put it up on our Facebook page. There's some great behind-the-scenes vision there. A lot of you getting in touch about the Shelly Bay development and the protesters there. This person says, go protesters in Andy. Fully support your actions. Castles took advantage of a dysfunctional iwi board. But someone else says the Wellington Mayor should, of all people, know about democracy. How dare he encourage protesters? Someone else says, why did he allow the council to discuss the matter and make a sell and lease decision before the court decides next March whether the sale to Castles was legal?
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. The Prime Minister says Oranga Tamariki is already moving towards working more closely with Māori providers and iwi. With regard to Māori children, the Children's Commissioner Andrew Beecroft is calling for a complete transfer of the Ministry's resources and power to Māori. Jacinda Ardern says the way in which children have been removed from their families has caused a lot of trauma and damage, but change can't be rushed or made unilaterally.
You know, when you've got more than 5,000 children in care, if all of those children, you know, were suddenly changed up and where they were being cared for and how, are we ready for that? We do need to keep making change. It does need to be in partnership. It's just the speed at which we can safely do that.
Jacinda Ardern. However, Judge Beecroft says Māori approaches are key for long-lasting beneficial change.
Because in the end, only Māori can decide, determine and deliver appropriate services for Māori.
Andrew Beecroft says the entire system needs to be transformed. He says that 180 years on from the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Māori deserve better when it comes to the removal of their pepe by Oranga Tamariki. An Invercargill City Councillor says he's shocked and disappointed at the Mayor's denial of his failings. An independent review has blamed much of the council's dysfunction on a leadership void caused by Tim Shadbolt's increasing inability to fulfil his duties. Sir Tim says he's being scapegoated, a response that surprises former Deputy Mayor Darren Ludlow.
The Mayor can say what he wants. He's the Mayor. He has a separate mandate from the rest of us. It is a little surprising that his position has changed a little.
The review was made public today, along with a council action plan, in light of concerns raised by Te Tari Tai Whenua, the Department of Internal Affairs. There's been a surge in the number of complaints related to a police investigation into sex assaults by a group of Wellington musicians. Allegations made online include rape, sexual assault and violence. When the police opened their investigation last month, they said they'd received a small number of complaints. Today, they confirmed they have now had about 20 reports in relation to Operation Emerald, but no charges have been laid as their inquiries continue. Hawke's Bay Civil Defence wants to lay to rest the idea that it looked after higher socioeconomic areas first after the Napier flood 2 weeks ago. Fire trucks and other response teams spent most of their time on Napier Hill in the first hours after the floods. The lower socioeconomic suburbs on the flat, like Mariwa, Maraenui and Onekawa, were also badly hit but weren't top priority for emergency services on the night. Regional Civil Defence Controller Ian MacDonald says this was because there was a bigger threat to life on the hill.
The first priority is life, basically, saving life, and there was a number of slips on the Monday night which were crashing down into the backs of people's houses, so getting those people out were a priority.
Napier's mayor says the response to the flood will be formally reviewed. A person died in a workplace accident in Christchurch today. Emergency services were alerted to the accident in McAlpine Street just after 2 this afternoon. The police say WorkSafe has been advised. 3 more projects for fast-track consenting under COVID-19 recovery legislation have been proposed by the government. There are commercial and residential development on Auckland's Dominion Road, the Ohinawai Foam Factory in Huntly and the Vines subdivision in Richmond. The Environment Minister David Parker says that if they're approved, it's estimated the projects will create more than 2,000 jobs during the construction phase and about 200 permanent jobs. Decisions on the applications are expected to be made by an independent expert panel early next year. It's 4 minutes past 6. Suggestions by Junior Far's camp that former world heavyweight champion Joseph Parker isn't taking their planned fight seriously are being dismissed by Parker's trainer. The fight between the 2 New Zealand heavyweights has been postponed until February or March next year, as Far needs to have surgery for a medical condition. Far's trainer Eugene Berriman says the fight delay will only help Parker, as he believes he was underprepared for the original December date. But Parker's trainer Kevin Barry rejects that, saying Parker has plenty to lose if he doesn't win.
This is a fight that we are taking very, very seriously. The stakes could not be higher for us. If we don't get this fight right against Junior Far, it's going to be a long time before Joseph gets back in the mix to fight for the world heavyweight title.
Kevin Barry. Russian Daniil Medvedev wants to be part of a new series of long-running rivalries in men's tennis after beating Dominic Thiem to win the ATP Finals title in London. His win over the third-ranked team follows victories over the world's top 2 players, Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, earlier in the tournament.
One of my best victories. 2 hours 42, 3 sets against amazing player Dominic. You are playing unbelievable. I hope we're going to have many more matches to come on the big occasions like this. Semi-final of US Open, a final here.
Daniil Medvedev. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Ricky Swannell looks back on the weekend's sport. We have a window on the world of Barack Obama. Ahead of the release of his memoirs, the former US president speaks with historian and broadcaster David Olusoga, and motoring nostalgia with Steve Barnett and his photo history book of Kiwis and their cars from the 50s to the 80s, from prefects to 120Ys, maybe even a Kingswood or 2. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, fine spells and isolated showers tonight, scattered rain tomorrow. Auckland, Waikato and Coromandel Peninsula, fine with high cloud tonight, rain developing tomorrow. Waitomo to Manawatu, including central high country, also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly fine tonight, isolated showers inland. Rain spreading south tomorrow with some heavy falls possible. Wairarapa, also Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods with isolated showers developing. Cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain from tomorrow afternoon. For Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, showers becoming isolated tonight but rain developing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the South Island, mostly fine. Scattered afternoon and evening showers mainly inland and drizzle developing about the east coast tomorrow night. Chatham Islands, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning then becoming fine. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The Children's Commissioner wants no more urgent uplifts of tamariki and pepe Māori from hospitals, but has stopped short of recommending an end to all uplifts where the family isn't notified beforehand. Those recommendations are from the newly released second part of Judge Andrew Beecroft's inquiry into the removal practices of Māori babies by Oranga Tamariki. One social worker working with teenage Māori mothers in South Auckland welcomes the recommendation, but says it could go even further to stop all uplifts without notice. Mediana Johnson explains.
The systemic removal of newborn babies from their mothers was exposed to the nation in June last year when Oranga Tamariki tried to take a 6-day-old baby from its teenage mother in a hospital in Hastings. The Children's Commissioner has today called for this to never happen again.
We are clear that we must stop removals from hospitals, birthing units and maternity centres. They ought to be places of well-being, care and wholeness, not trauma and dislocation.
He says informal discussions with DHBs about implementing this have been encouraging. South Auckland social worker Oranga Tamariki has witnessed police officers surrounding a young mother in hospital trying to take her newborn baby. She welcomes the call to stop these removals at birth, as she says the impacts last a lifetime.
That sense of abandonment. Where are my parents? Why am I not with them? The effects that not only on the child, but the mother is like, oh my God, I've lost my child, and to have to replace that child. Therefore, they go out and have another child. And then we've got another baby that's in the system.
This newly released report heard from not only whānau, but midwives, community support people and Oranga Tamariki staff. Midwives shared how they were not included in decisions made by Oranga Tamariki to remove babies from their whānau and how these decisions were often done in underhanded ways. One midwife says a mother was showering at the hospital and when she got out, the police were in the process of taking her baby. In another instance, a midwife says Oranga Tamariki arranged a meeting with the whānau, midwife and other agencies, and while this was taking place, they took the baby. Judge Andrew Beecroft has stopped short of calling for all uplifts that take place without the knowledge of whānau to be halted.
We chose the word prevent very carefully because that's what we want to move to. We believe that with much better earlier intervention, collaboration, iwi leadership, they would never be necessary. And that's what we're moving towards. But you're right, we stopped short of using the word stop.
Oranga Tamariki says there is no need for these uplifts at all.
There shouldn't be any without notice uplifts. At least prepare a whānau that can get somebody who's safe within that whānau to take that baby.
The key recommendation from the report is a call for Oranga Tamariki to transfer resources and power for the care of Māori babies and children to whānau hapu and iwi. Lady Tureiti Moxon from the National Urban Māori Authority says there are already plenty of examples of Māori models of care, such as kohanga reo and whānau ora.
And we've got lots and lots of Māori providers who have been in this realm for a very long time and who have worked really hard to have Māori whānau stay within their iwi and keep their whakapapa ties strong, and they're the ones really who are going to be doing this.
Assistant Māori Children's Commissioner Glenys Philip-Barbara said in Te Reo Māori the most important message she wanted the government to take on board was to be a good treaty partner and hand over resources to Māori.
Whakatinana hia te triti o Waitangi. Whakatinana hia. Tukuna te mana, me ngā rauemi, me ngā whakaaro rangatira, ki ngā rangatira Māori.
In a statement, Oranga Tamariki's chief executive, Gráinne Moss, acknowledged the findings and says they will be considered, alongside the recommendations from the Waitangi Tribunal hearing. The Crown is speaking before the Tribunal later this week. Gráinne Moss says transferring power from her ministry to iwi and Māori organisations is a decision only the government can make. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern stopped short of committing to transferring power.
It sits with us for very good reason, because it is such a significant use of power. But the way it has been done has been hugely problematic. And so rightly now, we've had 4 reports all looking into this issue, and now it's our job to act on that. But we're not going to do it unilaterally, otherwise we'll end up repeating our mistakes.
Jacinda Ardern says they already have agreements and arrangements with iwi and Māori organisations in the preventative space. She agreed that partnership was the only way forward. Mo te hōtaka o te Ahiahi, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
And Checkpoint invited the Minister for Children, who is responsible for Oranga Tamariki, that's Calvin Davis, on the programme. He wasn't available, and Oranga Tamariki's CEO, Gráinne Moss, declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint. The new Health Minister says he's very concerned about impending strike action by St John paramedics and is urging all involved to find a resolution. Hundreds of St John paramedics who are first union members will walk off the job on Wednesday and Saturday because of failed pay negotiations, including a promise to pay time and a quarter for overnight and weekend work. But St John says it can't afford that and needs an additional $80 million from next year to make sure ambulances aren't taken off the road. Andrew Little told our reporter Nita Blake-Person both parties need to step back from the brink.
I am very concerned about it. Our ambulance services are crucial to every community's sense of safety and security, and so the idea that they might be withdrawn for a period is very concerning. Equally, I know that the parties are working very hard to try to resolve the issue. I know that health officials have been assisting them as well. I would just urge St John and the union involved to do everything they can to work their way through to try to find a resolution and not to potentially disrupt people later this week when they intend to take industrial action.
St John now saying they need $80 million more next year to avoid services being reduced. Have they told you how much of an impact their services are likely to take in terms of a hit if they don't get that money?
I know that there have been ongoing issues with St John and the funding of the ambulance service, and that's why there was a review by Martin Jenkins of that. That review drew a number of conclusions about the way St John was managing itself. Look, in the end, what do people expect? They expect a properly functioning ambulance service and an emergency service that is there when it is needed. And we need to know that skilled, qualified people are staffing those ambulances, and it's part of our health service, and that's what we want to achieve. I think in the middle of an industrial bargaining exercise like this, we need to keep the focus on just making sure we have the best service possible going.
Do you think we have that functioning and proper ambulance service consistently at the moment?
I think right now people can have confidence in the ambulance services. Of course they can, but this is a situation where the personnel of the ambulance service are negotiating with their employer. That is their right to do that. They want the best, of course, for them, and we want the best for them too. I think there's, challenges for the health system generally to make sure that ambulance services are supported, but we've got to make sure also that people are fairly rewarded, fairly managed, fairly treated in doing that work.
Is the government considering giving St John the $80 million it's asking for additionally next year?
Well, we haven't had any specific request for that. The arrangements between the government and St John's comes up for renegotiation periodically. No doubt that'll be an issue that will be dealt with then. But St John management runs St John. They make commitments. They've made commitments in previous collective agreements with their respective staff unions, and it's for St John and their management to honour their commitments that they've made.
Do you have concerns about the way St John is managing its own finances?
Look, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on that. They've contracted to run the services. They've got a job to do that. They negotiate with the Ministry of Health and with ACC and with other funding providers to ensure that they can run that service and a high-quality service, because that's what New Zealanders expect. As the Minister of Health, I expect them to maintain a high-quality service. That's what we need to make sure comes out the end of this.
I guess as Minister, though, you must be seeing the comments from paramedics about unsafe staffing or a toxic culture, things like that. Does that worry you?
It's obviously very serious when those sorts of comments are made. I can't get involved, and I wouldn't get involved in the management of St John. It simply wouldn't be appropriate for me to do that. And there are a number of approaches to dealing with those sorts of issues that staff have available to them. When it comes to the setting of their remuneration, they negotiate that, and they're doing that at the moment through their union, and they've got to be enabled to go through that sort of process. When St John comes to the government and their other various funding providers for their resources to run that service, then that's a matter for them to make sure that what they're doing enables them to run a high-quality service staffed by qualified people.
Is resolving the issues with St John a priority for your new portfolio?
Absolutely. I mean, the thought of any disruption in a service like the ambulance service is concerning to me. I know that officials have been working with both sides to make sure that they're keeping focused on the issues at hand. They are keeping me in touch with that, and I expect to get reports over the next couple of days about progress being made.
And that was the Health Minister Andrew Little speaking to Nita Blake-Person. It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A South Auckland councillor is calling for more youth workers in the area after a series of shootings during the weekend. There were 6 gang-related incidents in Otara on Friday and Saturday, 5 of which involved gunshots. No one was injured, but police officers were temporarily armed until this morning as they waited for the dust to settle. Reporter Jean Bell and visual journalist Simon Rogers went out to Otara today and filed this report.
The police have been busy carrying out searches, seizing ammunition and other firearms equipment after the weekend's gunshots. But Efeso Collins, Manukau ward representative, thinks there is a better way to address the root problem. He is calling for the return of government-funded youth workers in Auckland, which he says caused gang participation to nosedive. Mr Collins says crime levels have bounced back after the $3 million to fund the workers was withdrawn in 2017.
You take the youth workers away, you're taking away intelligence from the community, intelligence for the police. If a cop turns up to a gang headquarters, that's just going to create violence. You're expecting a war. But if the police, who do their job really well, are working alongside youth workers who are collecting intelligence, understanding where the recruitment activities are going on, and they all go on either at school, at church, or in the after-school hours, that's where the youth workers are most effective. And if we've got them on the streets, on the ground, supporting our young people who are being exposed to all sorts of glamorised violence, then we've got the ability to support them and nurture them through school and through home. We don't have that anymore, and unfortunately this is the result.
He says the COVID-19 lockdowns had a silver lining because people were off the streets, but it didn't solve long-simmering issues.
We had lingering issues prior to COVID-19. We took everyone off the streets, but we didn't take the problems away. And so we've come back out now, we're out of lockdown, and those problems resume. There are gangs who are wanting turf. The Comancheros have been sent back or deported back from Australia, and they've been deported to New Zealand with their issues. They're looking for turf, they're looking for streets that they can claim as their own, and they're pushing in. And so you've got this inter-gang rivalry and competition as to who owns what streets.
Mr Collins says increased social support, particularly youth workers, would help make a world of difference.
Why we need really good community constables, and the police are doing a fantastic job, but we also need youth workers. We need our churches to step up. It's one thing to collect their tithes and to look in from a distance. It's another to actually get involved with the young people.
Maria Peach, who works in South Auckland, says social deprivation needs to be addressed.
I actually think there needs to be a massive investment in, eradicating poverty. Looking at the way that, our community is exploited in labour and so forth. And I mean, it's at times, I'm 46, and so times have changed over the last 20 years. There used to be a lot of work out there, and now it's so hard for young people to find work. Like one person will be applying for a job, maybe 400 or 500 people will be applying for one job, And so I think if you eradicate poverty, then people aren't going to resort to other means to earn money.
Rana Judge, Otara Business Association manager, says the spate of shootings did not help bring people out to the town centre already hit by COVID-19.
Due to COVID, our town centre got slowed down. We don't get many customers. Reason is a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of people considering for their health as well. And, they're not coming to the town centre what they used to come.
Rana Judge had one message for the community: be kind and take care. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jean Bell DNA.
The Social Development Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, was not available for an interview, but RNZ understands she has sought advice to clarify some of the concerns raised there. A major study of primary school children has found a puzzling fall in performance in writing for some 8-year-olds. The study, run by the University of Otago and the Council for Educational Research, covered 4,000 children in Year 4 and Year 8 last year. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The study has been running since 2012, and Charles Dar from the Council for Educational Research says one of the main findings this time around is that there's been next to no change in achievement for most areas of literacy. He says the exception is Year 4 students in writing.
In writing we see the scores go down, but they don't really go down for our Māori and Pacific students. It's the high decile schools and boys in high decile schools, particularly I guess as well, that have shown the drop that's been big enough to bring our population scores down slightly.
Schools have given reading and writing a lot of attention in recent years, and Charles Dar says the lack of movement in literacy scores could be seen as surprising. Perry Rush from the Principals Federation says the results are not what schools will have been expecting.
It really is disappointing, particularly as we've worked very hard in schools with a very strong emphasis on the core, on doing better in reading and writing and mathematics. And I think despite that very strong emphasis that's come through from government and in policy, we're just not seeing the gains.
He says it's time for schools to try new approaches to teaching reading and writing instead of persevering with more of the same. He says the decline in writing scores for Year 4 students could be down to increased use of technology.
Quite a significant reduction for boys, quite a significant reduction for Pākehā, and quite a significant reduction for high decile schools in writing at Year 4. But you would have to ask the question whether they are all indicators of high technology use, not just at school but also at home, and the impact that is having on young people's literacy development.
The study also shows the percentage of students achieving at the level expected of their age group falls, sometimes significantly, between Year 4 and Year 8. It's a long-standing problem across most subjects, and Victoria University academic Michael Johnston says schools need more guidance on the most effective ways of teaching.
We have to look to the Ministry of Education for better guidance to teachers on what the most effective methods of teaching literacy are, and also to my colleagues in the teacher training institutions to train teachers to use those. So I think we need to have a push towards a more evidence-based approach to teaching of literacy.
He says the evidence suggests schools need to spend more time using a phonics-based approach to teaching reading. Meanwhile, Charles Dar says the study found a strong correlation between reading at home and doing well at school.
Year 8 students who read for more than 5 hours a week were scoring well above students who weren't getting that reading done. The fact that the effect seems to get bigger between Year 4 and Year 8 suggests that doing that reading and having that interest and getting that opportunity at home to extend your reading is really having an effect on your achievements.
The study found girls scored higher than boys in all forms of literacy, and children from high decile schools did better than those from low decile schools. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has congratulated President-elect Joe Biden on his election victory and has invited him to New Zealand.
I can tell you that was very warmly received by the President-elect. He spoke of his fond memories of visiting New Zealand several years ago. You could tell from the conversation he sensed a real connection to New Zealand, felt very welcomed here, and was very pleased to receive the invitation to come back here.
However, Donald Trump still shows no sign of conceding to Mr Biden. He's now lost 34 legal cases challenging the election result. The president has dodged reporters' questions for weeks, instead tweeting about how he should be the rightful winner. The ABC's Catherine Diss has this report.
Unhinged. A Frankenstein's monster.
Just some of the words the legal world has used to describe Donald Trump's countless attempts to overturn Joe Biden's victory. The latest legal battle to be thrown out in Pennsylvania. It was the 34th challenge to the election result dismissed by the courts. The judge scathing, describing the case as strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations, unsupported by evidence, and which asked him to effectively disenfranchise nearly 7 million voters.
We're beginning to look like we're a banana republic.
That's Republican Governor Larry Hogan on CNN. He's one of the few senior members of the party to break ranks with Donald Trump. And he's urging his party to instead address the crisis at hand.
It's time for them to stop the nonsense. It just gets more bizarre every single day. And frankly, I'm embarrassed that more people in the party aren't speaking up.
But there's little sign of that. The Trump campaign is appealing the legal ruling in Pennsylvania and has requested a recount in the state of Georgia, which only 2 days ago confirmed Joe Biden's victory following a second count of ballots. Legal challenges aside, the Trump administration's still locking Joe Biden's team out from accessing crucial government resources. Here's his Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, on ABC America.
The president-elect, the vice president-elect are not getting the kind of intelligence briefings they're entitled to. They're not getting we're not getting. Our transition isn't getting access to agency officials to help develop our plans. And there's a lot of focus on that vaccine rollout plan that's going to be critical in the early days of a Biden presidency. We have no access to that.
Rolling out the vaccine as expeditiously as possible now seems to be America's only path to bringing the pandemic under control. The head of the Trump administration's vaccine task force, Dr. Monchef Sauli, has confirmed he's yet to talk to the Biden campaign.
That report by the ABC's Catherine Diss. The West Indies cricketers are out of quarantine and preparing for 3 T20s and 2 tests against the Black Caps. For one star batsman, the runs have already started to flow and Kiwi Kai has been helping to cure the Caribbean homesickness. Darren Bravo scored a century in the 3-day match against NZA in Queenstown, which finished in a draw yesterday, and struck the one and only double ton of his test career against the Black Caps in Dunedin in 2013. Bravo averages over 60 in tests in New Zealand and he's hoping to feast again this tour. So what is the secret to his success in Aotearoa?
Probably the food. Tastes like home. I think the conditions, the wickets have been very, very good for batting. We don't really get those sort of wickets back in the Caribbean. And as I said, when you play in these conditions, you get value for your shots and stuff. And I'm someone I think I'm quite capable of batting long. So just a matter of getting a start.
Making the contest all the more interesting will be the involvement of live crowds. Bravo recently played in the Caribbean T20 League, which was held at empty grounds due to the COVID-19 pandemic. While conceding a raucous crowd isn't always good for his concentration, he says New Zealanders should be congratulated for getting the disease under control, allowing fans to pack into stadiums.
Most when I'm batting, whether they are fans or no fans, it don't really make a difference for me. Actually, it's a bit easier when the fans are not there. But it will be nice to have fans out, looking at the game, obviously, with the pandemic and stuff. That will be tremendous.
And that was the West Indies batsman Darren Bravo there. Last word on the Shelly Bay development. Andy Foster has taken a stand on the Shelly Bay land and should be supported for being on the right side of history, says this listener. Not many politicians have the guts to be there from the start. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister has offered the United States access to New Zealand's COVID-19 health team for advice on the pandemic during a phone call with President-elect Joe Biden. Former National Party President Judy Kirk and ex-Minister Kate Wilkinson will sit on the 5-person panel reviewing the party's 2020 election campaign. The new Health Minister is urging striking paramedics and St John to find a resolution as quickly as possible. Profits from gaming machines soared after the Level 4 lockdown compared with the previous quarter. Our next news and weather is at 7. Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
My dog's like, what's the word? Brimming with innocence, so hasn't tasted the harshness of the world yet.
Lately with me, Susanna Leia-Tawa, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.